first of all, it's a delight to meet young students as well as parents. The parents, of course, are the discerning readers. So I've got to make sure that all of you I can hold all your interest. As they say, the bookstore purchases are parents as well. So from that perspective, again, this is a poetry book that's very close to my heart. I have a bit of a pedagogical mindset. That's what I was telling all the academics downstairs. I think children truly, what they read today is what makes them who they are tomorrow. And I think we can't speak down to children. Children need to be entertained with things that are really of interest to them. But there's also got to be a little bit of an instructional point of view to anything you write. Fun, zany, musical, all of that's important. Entertaining is wonderful as well. But if you can learn something new, the thing is, of course, you don't want the learning to be sort of too dull or too academic or too adult, because that won't hold a child's interest. So this book was designed. It was written essentially because I volunteered with fifth graders one weekend because I love engaging with children, and I taught a class called So You Want to Be a Poet. And the first thing I learned, and these were 10-year-olds, and they spent a long time trying to tell me how poetry, many of them didn't like mathematics, they said as well. They said, we don't like poetry. And I said, why? I mean, what is it about poetry you don't like? They said, my gosh, it's full of meter or something, and rhythm and rhyme and schemes and, all these things that you have to worry about. And it's not like just a sentence that's a sentence like prose. So we said, well, you know what? There's all kinds of poetry. There's all kinds of poems. There's so many ways that you can enjoy a good poem. Essentially, a poem to me is something that uses limited words. Of course, there are large. There's Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, which is 400 pages long. You can read them in segments, but there are many poems that are very long. So of course, I wasn't saying that, but that I happen to be a student of literature. But the reality is, most often, as William Blake said, to see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower. To me, it's essentially to be able to look at something small and be able to write or express something about it in ways that will resonate with the reader. And so that was the purpose of it. And we had a good time during that class. It was, I think, a 4-hour class. And we did a little bucket of words that we all came up with five-letter words, like today's Wordle, and put them in a little bag, and then we picked up words. So, we'd have alive sometimes, or we'd have chalk, or it could be any word, whatever anybody came up with. And we'd say, okay, let's think of something to write about this. And so you'd throw in some adjectives, you'd put in things together, and we all wrote poems by the end of the class, and it was wonderful. So the idea of unpacking poetry in a simple way was percolating in my head for a very long time. And when I finally gave up my other job and decided to be a full-time voice talent and a writer, working on poems that would introduce poetic forms to children was something that I wanted to do. Now, this particular book is unique, and I don't say that because I've written it, but it is, because what I've done is I've only introduced 9 poetic forms to you, but they're introduced in the form of the poem. So I'm going to read you 1 or 2 if you like. And I'll just complete what I was going to say, and that is I've written the form in the way it's intended, but in addition to that, I've given you an example poem which uses all the elements of whatever that form is. However, it's a relatable, easy, fun poem to hear and read, and you may not even have realized what it was. So, for instance, I'm going to read you a poem called Sonnet in Iambic Pentameter, and then I'll read you the example poem, and you'll get a sense of what I mean. The sonnet is just a simple poem. Its length is predetermined at the start. 14 lines in total, not a long tome. The octaves 8, the sestets 6 apart. The first 8 lines may rhyme quite easily. The next 6 lines may change repeatedly. Though the meter can vary, I'll show you some sonnets have 5 long beats through and through. Milton, Dante, and the great bard as well, with thoughtful words of life and death did tell. This form they used to express sentiment. They spoke of love and war and merriment. The sonnet is an interesting find, just 14 lines to speak what's on your mind. So we've written a poem that explains to you what is a sonnet in the shape of the sonnet. It's 14 lines, it has an octave and a sestet, and it has the Iambic pentameter, which is the long and short syllable, and you have the sound of a heartbeat, da-dum, 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 in each line. So you can hear it when you pay attention. And I've read this particular poem where you can hear the sound of the iambic pentameter. Now listen to the fun poem that was written for the children here, When Mummy Was Away. I packed my own lunch when Mummy was out, with sweets and treats, since she wasn't about. I took out the salad, threw carrots away, put in some cookies, a packet of Lay's, filled up my thermos with sweet 7-Up, joyfully dreaming of fizz in my cup, pulled out my sandwich, added some cake. This was a great lunch, I made no mistake. But something went very wrong with my plan. You don't want to look in the garbage can. Through recess, I lay on the ground in pain. I'll never try packing my lunch again. All that sugar gave me a tummy ache. Junk food for lunch is a major mistake. So we have the 14 lines. Thank you, sweetheart. Look at that little one. So we have the 14 lines. We end with a couplet. We have the iambic pentameter. But if you were to read the poem, you're just going to think of it as a poem. What's interesting is, and that's what I wanted children to know, is that, you know, we're all poets in different ways, and a lot of what you're writing is already poetry. You may not necessarily recognize it as being particular distinct forms. So, anyway, okay, do you want me to read any other poems? So essentially that was the genesis. So I also introduced the book by telling you a little bit about the English language so that it sets the tone for what we're talking about. And I have an author's note, which is my way of, at least if you're reading aloud this book to children, you as the adult have a sense of what it is that I have done. So I believe in putting in what I call my author's notes in the children's books, because, you know, you need to be able to frame your writing in a way that resonates with all readers. I think that's very, very important. That's the universal appeal of a book, and a book that lasts forever. So, you know, you could read Margaret Wise Brown's Goodnight Moon to your child, and it has the sort of, you know, that anaphora, that repetitive line, the, you know, good night, moon, and it's got that soporific effect, and children can go to sleep on it, and you see the same pictures. But, you know, in total, it's got what? Maybe 200 words in the book. And yet it is a book that has lasted, what, for 50 years or more than that. You know, you've read it, your children have read it, other children today are reading it. You know, it's that kind of thing. It's lasted through many generations. That's the appeal of a book. So even if it's a simple little poetry book like this, if we can introduce poetic forms and realize that the forms can in themselves be fun. So, you know, I introduce a haiku, and I didn't want to do just complicated poetry. A limerick is a poem. You know, an acrostic that Sudeshna just read aloud is a poem. And an acrostic is something that, you know, all of you are probably writing acrostics in your birthday cards to friends. You know, we say, it's easy enough to do. And in my acrostic, I've written you an acrostic in rhyme, but I've also written an acrostic that's not in rhyme. So I'll show you. Let me see or have they both in rhyme? Let me just see. Excuse me. Okay, so this is called an acrostic verse. And if you see it, because it's got the visual as well, you will, as Sudeshna, if I'd been paying attention, I would have heard the Tharoor. But she's got acrostic, A-C-R-O-S-T-I-C, I have it written down. Because, and I'll tell you why. An acrostic verse is fun to create. Count the letters for lines. This one has 8. Read and write the first letter or first word of each line, so it describes it much better, the word or phrase that you find. It's a special form whose message is clear, creating a word as it's meant to appear. So, excuse me, I need some water. Having some allergies. Is this allergy season in Delhi? I find that I'm sneezing and coughing. It's not COVID. I promise. Anji? So here's an example, again, a fun one, and that's the whole purpose, is that you've now learned what is an acrostic verse, and I'm going to give you an example of a fun acrostic verse that you could have written, and it's called Homework, the Dawdler's Lament. And we've got homework, it spells homework down there. Homework can be such a chore. Often I lose my way. My mind, it wanders here and there. Each time I'd rather play. Why must we always have to toil or do our sums and read? Recess all day will not spoil. Kids, more fun is what we need. So, it's got homework again. So that was another form that was introduced. Again, I can read to you the forms that I've introduced. And then I'll go to the second half of the book. So I've introduced a sonnet. I've done haiku. We have a diamante. We have an acrostic verse. We have a limerick, which everybody enjoys. Did you read, I shouldn't say this, but did you read my brother's hilarious limerick today? Okay, so I have a brother who's quite well known and a delightful entertainer in some ways, and in addition to be a very substantive individual. But I discovered it by accident. I was trolling something else and saw it in the news. No politics here, but this is just a comment. He wrote a limerick on Arvind Kejriwal's pose during Mr. Modi's speech, because evidently that was something that the party was very upset about, the pose. But anyway, I think I shouldn't digress. I can see that this is not doing well with the adults. Let's not go there. But I thought it was hilarious. It is. It's all over the place. Okay. Sonnet, haiku, diamante, acrostic. We have a limerick. We have a nonette. We have a villanelle. We have a couplet, which is so easy. And we have a triolet. So those are the poetic forms I've introduced with very entertaining, relatable, universally themed poems written in the exact same form as the poet that I've introduced, okay, as the poem. Then what we do is I've written what I call my little centerfold poem that takes you to the next section of the book. And I say, so we've seen a few forms and we've worked out some rhyme. We now know the norms and how rhythm keeps time. Let's take what we've read, have a good look around, write our world in new verses, fresh forms that abound. We'll see how far the English language can go. Learning is such fun, poems even more so. So we move from the first half of the poetic forms to the second section of the book, where I've just written to you a whole bunch of poems that share aspects of the English language that could be very appealing to children. For instance, there's a poem called Animal Groups. Did you know that it's a herd of cows, or a flock of chickens, or a school of fish, or a gaggle of geese? So we have all of that written into a long poem about animals. Then I've written to you about cheese can please. And we talk about different cheeses from all over the world, including our delicious paneer. And then I introduce a literary term, or rather a word, that you all probably know, but maybe some of you didn't know what the word was. And that is this very long word called onomatopoeia. Do any of the kids know what onomatopoeia is? I think many of you do, but you didn't know that's what it was called. Would you like me to read you that poem? Would you like to hear that poem? Okay. What is this strange word, I wonder, with vowels all jumbled together? Do you know how onomatopoeia is spelled? O-N-O-M-A-T-O-P-O-E-I-A. So that is a lot of vowels, isn't it? With, what is this strange word, I wonder, with vowels all jumbled together? Listen to me and I'll tell you, said my cousin the teacher Parminder. If horses' hooves should go cloppity clop clop, you can hear the sound of their trot. And if the rain coming down pitters and patters, that's precisely its sound, is it not? Well then, cloppity clop clop and pitter and patter are words whose sound can be heard. So onomatopoeia in poems is the formation and use of such words. Woof, woof, bang, bang, buzz and cackle, clatter, hiss and zoom, twitter and sizzle and murmur. Can't you just hear the sound of a boom? The formation and use of such words that imitate the sound that they name is onomatopoeia in Greek language. Use the term and you can take the path to fame. So we have that sort of example. There's also a delightful poem that I call it delightful because that's what everybody has loved this poem. It's called Hello World. And it introduces many different ways of saying hello in the world. I don't know how much time we have. You know, I can prattle on forever. That's one of the things that authors can do. I have a poem on mothering, about different outfits that mothers wear in different parts of the world. We have a poem called Houses and Homes. We have a poem about different living situations. You could live with your grandparents. You can live with your mother. Please, please, exactly. And we even have a poem on April Fool's Day.
Yeah. Ever thought of asking an author what stimulates her to write? Or has she ever any questions for her? Yep.
Where do you get the next ideas for the upcoming poems?
Where do I get the ideas for the poems?
Or inspired by something? Like
so, you know, different, as I told you, this particular book has been percolating in my head for a very long time. I did publish an American edition of poetry as well. So this is the Indian edition. It was something where I really wanted, truly, it came from a spirit, my teacher heart, saying that I want children to know that poetry can be fun. And in America, there are some really hilarious, wonderful, delightful poets. And when my children were growing up, I read to them every day. We would love it. There's even one called The Polar Bear and the Frigidaire by Shel Silverstein that I will never forget. I mean, I can't remember the words because now I'm at that age where I forget lines, but it is delightful and it's nonsensical. Dr. Seuss was sort of nonsensical, green eggs and ham and all of that. So, you know, so many other cultures seem to have these wonderful opportunities to have really sometimes irreverent but entertaining poems that capture children's imagination and get them interested in poetry. I really wanted to bring some fun poems in, but I also didn't want to take away from introducing children to different poetic forms because truly, I mean, you could write a couplet and you're a poet. You could write an acrostic without verse and that's still poetry. You can write non-rhyming lines, and that's poetry as well. Somebody asked me, can you write a sonnet in 20 lines? I said, no, then it's not a sonnet, because a sonnet is 14 lines. So there are some rules, but it doesn't mean that that's the only way you need to write a poem. So my inspiration comes in different ways. My next book is a book on an elephant, a temple elephant, and it's an adventure story. But when I started writing it, I wanted to write it in rhyme. So the entire book is written in quatrains, couplets, but 4 lines in each page, of a temple elephant and an adventure that she has. So you do get your adventure, but it's a picture book. It's a book for younger children. However, again, you will learn a lot of new words and new concepts, and I wanted to bring in again I always want to share something. So, my parents are diasporic Keralites. They were born in Kerala, but I was born in Bombay and raised in Calcutta and studied in America. And so, I see myself as a global citizen. But Kerala is where we went home every summer because that is where my grandmother was. And that's where, we spent 2 months experiencing village life and the language and everything else. So even though I'm illiterate in Malayalam, I can pick and read, but I can't really write proper sentences. And my parents are upset about it. My mother did send me to Malayalam classes when I was in school in Calcutta. But again, when you're a child, you fritter away these opportunities. Today, I speak better Malayalam than I did as a child because I really want to, so it's all down there, as they say. It's nascent, it's within you. It's sort of a subliminal impulse that then surfaces.
She has a question for you.
Please.
What's your age?
What's my age? I'm very old. I'm very old. I'm definitely older than your mother, and maybe I'm older than, no, I don't know if I'm older than your grandmother, but...
But I can tell you something, she's not the oldest with me around, okay? Right?
I'm old enough. That's what some people say when you ask them, how old are you? I'm old enough. I've learned a lot, but I'm still young enough to remember what it was like to be your age.
Okay, now another one from...
They say you should never ask a woman her age. Have you heard that line? Eventually you can look it up and you'll probably see it on internet or something.
All right, this is another question.
Can you read a Diamante poem?
Can I read you another poem?
Yes, a Diamante poem.
The onomatopoeia poem. Sorry, I can't hear you with the...
A Diamante.
A diamante.
He's doing it in school.
Oh, good for you. My gosh. Okay.
Oh.
Yes. So, okay, that's wonderful.
Interesting.
But it does have a rule. It's not just the visual look of it. So let me read you the diamante. That's so nice to hear you ask for that.
Yeah, which school are you from?
Okay.
Kunskap,
So diamante is on page 16. And you know what the diamante really, the rule is? So I'm going to first read you the rules and then I'll read you my example, okay? You have to be patient because the rules are rules. Diamante, in brackets, one object. Clever, creative, the second line, two adjectives about the object. Okay, so whatever you're writing about. So if you're writing about mother, then you could say one object, the word would be mother. Clever, creative, you could say mother. Lovely, kind, that would be adjectives, right? Then building, making, showing, because I'm going to tell you what my diamante is. Building, making, showing, three verbs about the object. Geometry, poetry, diamond, stone, four nouns, two on this object and two on the next. So a diamante has a particular shape, but it has to be done with using all of these. Shining, glowing, so that is going to be describing the first object. Brightening, three verbs about the second object. Now this is going to be very confusing to you unless you see it on the page, because then it's easier for you to follow. Brilliant, shapely, two adjectives about the second object. Gem, noun and second object. So the diamante was my first object. Gem was my second object in that first poem. Then I have the example poem, and it says ice cream / salad. So we have two objects, one is ice cream and the other is salad. And I say, ice cream, cold, creamy, melting, dripping, dropping, confection, dessert. So that's all about ice cream. Now we move to salad, vegetable, nourishing, strengthening, satisfying, crunchy, flavorful, food. That makes sense? So, and this is obviously not rhyming poetry, but it has a distinct shape. Now, I have to tell you this, and I don't think I have my publisher here. The diamante has a particular shape physically because they write the words that way. These guys for the layout have not quite done that. So that's the part that you can criticize if you want. However, the poem has followed the rules of the diamante.
Great.
Any more questions?
Oh, there is a question here from, he's going to be featured tomorrow. He's a child author from Mumbai, Pune.
I met another child author this morning.
Oh, you did?
I did. I'm so proud of you all.
So, are there any poets that you follow, or are you a fan of?
Follow on Twitter, you mean, or follow or read?
Like you read.
Okay. I read a lot of poetry, that is true. I like, of Indian poets, I like Arundhati Subramaniam and I like K. Srilata very much. But I have read other poets as well. It just seems that I like the sort of women issues that they write about. It appeals to me. I've read a lot of nonsensical children's poets, Jack Prolitsky, Shel Silverstein when I was raising my children in America. We've all read Sarojini Naidu's Palanquin Bearers and Nizim Ezekiel. There's just a wonderful collection of poetry from India that has just been published that I'm thinking of picking up because that has a whole gamut of writers. I don't particularly follow anybody, but I do like I'm open to all kinds of poetry. So, if you recommend somebody, I'd love to discover them. Thank you.
Any other questions? Right. I think, Akshata, we request you to just do the honors. A big, big thank you to Shobha.
Thank you, Sudeshna, and I wish you had allowed me to share the Amul picture with you. I apologize that I didn't know you had a quiz question intended.
That was, always a...
But I'll tell my sister that we were both...
As a Zavedian with a quiz, it's not possible. You have to have a quiz when there's a Zavedian around.
Right, that's true. Thank you so much. It's entirely my pleasure. It's been a delight to me as well. I really have enjoyed interacting with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.